One of the most important aspects of being a human being is being able to be in a relationship, being able to successfully form and maintain a relationship. And at the heart of that capability is the capacity to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to see the world how they see it. And that capacity is empathy. And it's a quality that leads to understanding between one person and another. It's a quality that is essential for some of the fundamental positive aspects of human interactions, like compassion and sharing and selflessness, things that lead to successful parenting, successful family activities, successful community, and ultimately successful society. And so people who who can't be empathic, who find only see the world through their own perspective, are essentially too selfish to be successful in a healthy human living group. They won't do things for others. They will not understand why they should give of their time, effort, and energy for those poor people over there, or why should I volunteer for the soccer team? Yeah. Why should I do that? It's, you know, I want to take, it's my time. That leads to a very, very dysfunctional society, and ultimately, you can't have society. You can't have a healthy family unless people are willing to have that empathic element of sacrifice.
How empathy develops in babies?
You know, it's interesting. We think about the development of children, and anybody realizes that a child's language will develop as a reflection of the language the parents speak to the baby. Everybody recognizes that the child's motor skills, their ability to kick a soccer ball, the ability to use a pencil to write, that will develop as a function of opportunities to kick the ball with mom and dad, or to, you know, practice writing. And so people understand the concept of use-dependent development of functions. Empathy, the ability to be, and the ability to be caring and loving, all of those relational capabilities also develop in a use-dependent way. So it is one of the most powerful and simple things about development, that this incredible complex capability will emerge if you love your baby, if you do consistent loving acts with your baby. Touching and responding to their needs and giving them opportunities for exploration. All of these things that you would normally do in healthy caregiving lead to this remarkable development. And really it's, you know, that's a great thing about our species, that if you're loved, you grow up to be loving. If you are given opportunities to hear and practice music, you can make music. If you are given opportunities to learn to read and write, you can become a poet. I mean, this is a wonderful capacity that we have to be able to absorb and then ultimately reflect the things that are given to us when we're little. And one of the most important of these is love and empathy. And of course, the flip side of that, that's so sad, and one of the reasons that we do this work that we do, is that there are children who don't get that much love. And there are children who do not get that much opportunity to, you know, kick the soccer ball. And there are children who don't get spoken with. And so their potential to be compassionate, productive, creative human beings is limited until we can step in and help them recreate and recapture some of those experiences.
Right. You have this wonderful and fantastic book, Born for Love, and the title is Why Empathy is Essential, and the other part is Why is in danger.
Right.
So could you explain a little bit why it's in danger?
Yeah. Human beings, for thousands of generations, have lived in very close-knit groups, typically 40 to 50 people, where there were multiple families and multiple generations of families all living together. And in that environment, a child who was growing up was a very valuable commodity. And literally the lifeblood of the clan was carried in the young children. And so children were very, very highly valued. And many of you, I'm sure, who are listening are aware that, you know, disease and malnutrition and other things really made infant mortality very high. And so frequently, you know, for ages and ages and ages, infants would die at a much higher rate than they die now. Young children would die. So children, very, very, very important, very, very valuable. And the interesting thing about our species is that for every child under the age of 6, just to maintain population equilibrium, there were at least 3 or 4 developmentally more mature individuals who would protect, educate, nurture, enrich the child's life. So this relational density, you know, the fact that there were all these people to love these children and to protect these children and to teach these children, meant that they got lots of repetition with relational things. One of the unique qualities of the human brain, and I should say of all brain tissue, but it's true of humans, is that all these systems in our brain, language, motor systems, and relational neurobiology, they all grow as a function of use. So there's a term we use, it's called use-dependent development. And so what that means is, if you're a little child and you grow up and somebody speaks to you 1,000,000 words, by the time you're age 3, you've got a good high vocabulary. If somebody speaks 500,000 words to you by the time you're 3, your vocabulary is less. Mm-hmm. And if somebody only speaks 100,000 words to you, you don't even have language. So the brain develops in a use-dependent way. And so if you envision a child growing up in this traditional, multi-generational milieu, multi-generational mm-hmm. environment, these kids were literally swimming in touch and smiles and conversation and all kinds of relational enrichment that provided the repetition to develop their capacity to be empathic and caring and loving, which meant that's why our species survived. Now, fast forward to the last 100 years. In the last 100 years, Western civilization has changed the way human beings live together. We have our own homes, and in our homes we have our own rooms. In our own rooms we have our own televisions. And so children are watching TV or in front of a screen 8 to 12 hours a day. Mm-hmm. The ratio of caregivers or developmentally mature individuals in their lives goes mm-hmm. from 4 to 1 child down to 1 teacher and 25 kids. Yeah. And so we have this, we've literally turned on its head yeah. the ratio of relational experience that we should have. And what that means is the parts of the brain involved in forming and maintaining relationships, the parts of the brain involved in empathy, the part of the brain involved in compassion and humanity and all these good things we want our kids to be, it's being understimulated. It's literally like we're expecting these kids to just spontaneously know how to be socially appropriate. A child who has never been in a conversation doesn't know how to have a conversation. If they're tweeting all the time and texting and they have, you know, 5 minutes a day with their parents where they get direct interaction and that's it, how can you expect their brain to develop these complex social capabilities? And that's what we mean by endangered. That we have, as cultures and as a society, particularly in the U.S., because we're sort of leading the world off the cliff, because we have more TVs, more media, we have the worst teacher ratios, we have the most compartmentalized, fragmented cultures. We have children every year in a public school in the US, 1/3 of the kids are new because families are mobile. They move, they move, they move. They move away from neighbors, they move away from family. And so we've created this fragmented, compartmentalized culture that literally is creating what I call poverty of relationships. And that poverty of relationships is beginning to have significant consequences. Increases in bullying, increases in violence, increases in selfish behavior, decreases in empathic, compassionate behavior, less volunteering, less voting. All kinds of things that are crucial for the health of a culture are diminishing and diminishing and diminishing.
Right. What happened when a mother and baby are in a tune?
You know, one of the really fascinating things about our brain is that it's designed for human communication. And what happens is, and there's a lot of biology that is behind this, but very simply, our brain essentially will mirror the cognitions, the motor activity, and the emotions of people that we're interacting with. So if a mother is engaged and really truly present in that moment with her baby, and she truly feels just loving to this infant, that infant feels that same feeling of being loved. And so for an infant, love is not the abstraction it is for you and I. For an infant, love is behavior. And so when the mother is, the baby cries because she's hungry, and mother comes, and she puts baby in her arms, and provides warmth and rhythm and the visual input from her smile, all of these cues get turned into patterned neuronal activity that go up into the parts of the baby's brain, and they do three things. The first thing is that it makes the stress response system quiet. The baby feels safe. The second thing is it relieves the physiological distress of being hungry or thirsty. And when you relieve physiological distress, you feel pleasure. So the baby feels safe and good, feels pleasure. And the third thing is that the baby is beginning to make a connection between human interaction and safety and pleasure. And so in that moment, when the mother and the infant are having that wonderful little attuned, synchronous interaction, literally their brains are in synchrony. Parts of the baby's brain are activating in the same ways that parts of the mother's brain are activating. And it's this really amazing synchrony. And then, of course, you can't maintain that forever. Mom will, her other child will call to mom, and mom will look away, and the baby will have a little moment of being out of sync. And they kind of go, where are you? Where are you? And everybody has seen those, had that experience or seen those videos of a baby where there's a break in that engagement. And then mom will look back, and the baby goes, oh, there you are. And so there's this disengagement, engagement, disengagement, engagement, disengagement, engagement. And remember what I said earlier about use-dependent development of the brain? What's happening is this baby's getting repetition, 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 repetition that tells the baby, mom's predictable, mom's, humans are safe, humans are rewarding, humans are predictable, humans are safe, humans are rewarding. And it happens literally in any 1 hour long interaction with a mom having a quiet time with her baby. That could happen 1,000 times. And so you get 1,000 repetitions. And it's these wonderful little, ups and downs and breaks and repairs and breaks and repairs and breaks and repairs that provides the rhythmic, repetitive stimulation of these parts of the brain that really ultimately weave together and create in the mind of the baby a neurobiology of healthy attachment that reflects the healthy attachment that the mother has.
Okay. And for example, we have a mother that is not in a tune with the baby.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
can we teach, or how can we provide a
Yeah.
good experience for her?
Yeah. That's a wonderful question, and that's a big challenge. But the good news is you can do it. And people usually start that process, I don't want to say in the wrong way, but let me just say what I would suggest. The strategy to make a good maternal-child interaction is to actually meet some of the fundamental needs of the mother first. If you can't, a distressed mother, a depressed mother, a frightened mother, an overwhelmed mother, no matter how much she wants to be present and do the right things, there's a physiological push away from being able to do that. So the first thing you need to do to help a mom be as attuned as she can be is take care of her. You as the therapist, you as the counselor, you as the friend, you have to make her feel safe and appreciated and cared for, just like she is ultimately going to make her baby feel safe and cared for. And so you are trying to essentially induce a parallel process. The ideal thing to make that mother capable of being attentive and attuned and responsive the way we want her to, so she can create with her infant this wonderful attachment interaction, is to meet her needs. And many of the mothers that we work with are incapable of doing that for one of two reasons. One is many of them never received that kind of attentive, attuned caregiving when they were young, so their neurobiology of relational interaction is immature and undeveloped. This usually, not always, but this also usually tracks with or goes along with other forms of instability in your life. A history of chaos, unemployment, you don't know where you're going to live, domestic violence, all things that are in the moment physiologically disrupting. So if a mother's stressed out, depressed, overwhelmed, she will not be able to have that quiet, calm state that's required for this optimal infant parent interaction. So, you as the counselor, the therapist, the friend, the more you are present and attentive and attuned and responsive to the needs of the mother, the more you help her find somebody to take care of her kids, the more you help her do kind of the good old-fashioned social work to figure out where she's going to live, and the more you help her feel materially safe and then emotionally safe, the more she'll be able to be this attentive, attuned caregiver for her baby. And then the beautiful thing about that is that that's also building into the brain of the mother ultimately healthy attachment capabilities.
Right. Well, talking about tantrums, in Spanish, berrinches. Yeah. How we can manage these tantrums empaticamente. Empathically.
Well, here's one of the first questions you want to ask about sort of tantruming behavior is, at what age are they doing this? So the tantruming of a 16-year-old usually gets them arrested. And the tantruming of a 2-year-old is social culturally tolerated, right? I mean, most people understand that if you've got a little 2-year-old, and I just saw one out here in the plaza, he used to have a little tantrum, and mom was just like dragging him along, and everybody's like looking at him and kind of, some people were sympathetic, like, oh my gosh, and some people were kind of laughing because it was, he was having his little angry little thing. But we tolerate that. We know that that's a developmental phenomenon. The problem with kids that are maltreated, who have these developmental insults, is that the tolerance levels and the frustration and the explosive behaviors that are completely acceptable when you're 2 don't improve when they're 4 or 6 or 8. And so they may developmentally be like a 2-year-old, and when they get frustrated, they'll act like a 2-year-old. But if you do that in a 6-year-old body, you get kicked out of class. And it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about sort of these externalizing, tantruming behaviors, there's a couple of things that we want people to think about. Usually, these behaviors can be either attenuated, sort of diminished, or extinguished if the child has some sense that they're in control. You give children choices. And I know this is very easy for me to say, but let me tell everybody out there, I had 5 kids. So this isn't just some academic talking. And I can tell you 2 things. One is, all this stuff I'm saying, it's a lot harder to do than it is to say. So I've had tantruming children, and my wife would look at me like, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, fix this. And I'm like, ah. But the key thing, and again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you remember what we were talking about with relational neurobiology, human beings mirror the affect of people around them. So the easiest way to deal with tantrum behavior is for you, as the parent, to stay calm. If you start to get frustrated or anxious or even angry that the child's not following through with what you say, you will literally be adding gas to a fire. It'll make the tantrum worse, and it'll make it longer. And you'll feel more incompetent, then you'll get more angry, and it becomes this, instead of a co-regulating experience, it's a dysregulating experience. The child's difficult to deal with. The mom gets frustrated. Come on, we have only so much time to get here. And because the mom's a little frustrated, the child will get a little bit more escalated, and then they get harder to deal with. And the mom actually gets over and says, grabs him by the shoulder and says, yes, come on, we're going. And as soon as you touch me, he goes up here. And then she goes, you're not going to act that way. And pretty soon, you're both escalated. And so what you find is, if you can learn how to step back, tolerate a little bit of this huff and puff and their flustering and blustering, the calmer you are, the more you are, I don't want to say oblivious, but impervious to the emotional part of this, the sooner they'll start to reflect and organize around you. But I can guarantee you that's one of the things that's happened in a relationally impoverished family environment or school environment is that tantruming behavior occurs much more. Because you're on your own with multiple kids. But think about how different it would be if there were 5 or 6 adults and there was just a couple of kids. If a kid started to get huffy and puffy and act out, you've got 5 people there that you can distribute the caregiving responsibility with. And you don't get so anxious that if I don't get him to do this right on time, then my other child's going to have this. And so you don't feel as anxious about that. You're able to stay calmer. The incidence of these things are much lower and much less frequent. So again, this is, to some degree, this tantruming behavior is an artifact of our artificial caregiving, educational, and community building in the Western world. You don't see a ton of tantrums when you study traditional child-rearing environments. They don't have tantrums. You just don't. You don't see it. I mean, these people like Ed Tronick, who've done studies of Aboriginal communities. They're like, it just doesn't happen. Same thing with sleep problems. Babies and sleep problems. That doesn't happen in those communities. They have a completely different environment. They're much more developmentally tuned in, and as a result, their children have far fewer regulation problems, they have less anxiety, they have fewer sleep problems, they have fewer explosive behavioral problems.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Bruce.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.